Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am Aaron Washington, your host of the NTC podcast. Colin Maher, our salary cap specialist, is joining me on this podcast here, guys. Number 70, we're glad to be back with you all. It's been a hot minute. Colin took a trip to Mexico recently. I took a trip myself. I can't say it was exotic or as crazy as Mexico, but took a trip to Florida last week. So we've been out and about a little bit, doing a little bit of traveling, but we're back. We have a few news topics to cover here. We have the Eastern Conference playoffs to talk about, the conference finals in each conference. One has finished. One, in my personal opinion, should have been finished, but it's ongoing. So we'll talk about that here a little bit more in depth. But Colin, glad to have you back on the air, man. It's been a hot minute, but glad to be back, and hope you've been enjoying these playoffs, man. It's been kind of a crazy ride, especially these 2 series.
Seriously, man, it's been great. It was every series was amazing, and then we got to the conference finals, and it was like, man, are we going to get 2 sweeps? And despite what you might think, thank God we got at least some competition on the Eastern Conference side. So hopefully it goes even further than that, but we'll dive into it.
Oh, absolutely. I got some thoughts. I'm sure you do as well. So we'll get there here shortly. To kick things off, Western Conference Finals series, we wanted to discuss a little bit here. Do a little bit of recap of Lakers Nuggets. You look at the overall result and you see the 4-0 sweep in the results, but you look at the box scores and it paints a different story. You see the final results. Nuggets only won game 1 by 6 points. They won game 2 by 5 points. Game 3 was a little bit less competitive. It was an 11-point win for the Nuggets in LA. And then the final game was 113-111. So they won that one by 2 points. LeBron had a chance at the end to tie the game or to win the game. Couldn't convert. The Nuggets swarmed them in that last possession, and that was the series. But we'll get to LeBron here in a minute, Colin. We have some thoughts on him and his future. But I wanted to start off with Anthony Davis and his performance. I wanted to highlight him for a second. In my personal opinion, he had a good series. He was very solid. I thought that he left something on the table, a little bit on the table as far as offensively. Defensively, he was a force. He had multiple blocks, I think, in just about every game. The Nuggets had a lot of issues trying to get inside on him, get good looks against him. But looking at his numbers, I mean, he was 14 of 23 in game 1. Excellent performance, 40 points. He was 4 of 15 in game 2, only 18 points. 11 of 18 in game 3, 28 points, and 6 of 15 in game 4. So for me, it was a lot of up and down from Davis. 40 points, and then it was 18, and then it was 25, and just a lot of up and down. I feel like the Lakers really needed that sustained scoring load. It's great to be a defensive force, but when you're in the, arguably a top 10 tier of NBA players, you really need to be a force on both ends of the floor, especially with LeBron in his current condition, being injured, being older, playing a lot of minutes. They needed that charge from Davis, and I feel like at times he wasn't able to provide that. So it's kind of disappointing to see that. However, the Lakers as a whole, I think, played well, and the fact that they even got to this point was very impressive. They started the season 2-10, so I think many of us, I'm sure yourself included, didn't expect them to be at the conference finals. But with everything being considered, I think they had a good performance. They fought hard. LeBron played almost the whole game in game 4. So, I mean, they tried their best, but the Nuggets are just that good this year. They have all the pieces together. So, what did you think about the Lakers' performance overall, even though they unfortunately got swept in that series?
Yeah, I mean, look, the better team won. I think a lot of people just don't talk about the Nuggets for some reason when they went wire to wire as the best team in the West. But yeah, as far as the Lakers, they went 2-10 at the beginning of the year as a completely different team. Rob Pelinka did a great job putting together a truly competitive team, and we saw what they did after the All-Star break, running through into the playoffs. But where they got, I honestly thought that they would lose to the Warriors after the Warriors got past the Kings. I thought the Warriors might make a run, but so I thought the Warriors was an impressive series victory. But after that, they kind of got as far as they could go with what they had, and kind of what you said. I mean, Anthony Davis essentially had to be Superman for them to win, and he's just not that anymore. when you have to rely on LeBron James and Anthony Davis to put up such a load when in you know, I don't have the stats here as far as how many minutes they were playing, but even in losing, you know, these losing games, they're playing a ton of minutes. It just wore on them after the, you know, in the third playoff round. It's just going to catch up to those guys, and the other players played well, but at some point, you know, the Nuggets are just a better team, and they couldn't get it done against them. Yeah, the games were competitive, but they're just not a better team than the Nuggets, and that's what it comes down to. Even in that fourth game, where the Lakers were up 15, and again, you just see a more athletic, younger, better all around, deeper team come back, take the lead, and then hold it in the end, even when LeBron has a chance. And no surprise the Nuggets went on. It's probably a surprise that they swept them, but no surprise that the Nuggets advance.
Yeah, I mean, I think I expected the Lakers to be here. I picked them over the Warriors. However, I also I was thinking that they would at least take a game or two against the Nuggets, even if they weren't going to win
Sure.
that one. You know, going back to your point about the minutes load for the Stars, LeBron played 42, almost 43 minutes a game in that series.
Yeah.
Anthony Davis was just below him at 41. So those guys definitely were putting in a lot of minutes. I mean, Jokic and Murray were about the same. They're in the 40s, but you know, they got a little bit more support from the others, and their best players were better. I mean, there's no doubt that Jokic and Murray were more impressive than LeBron and Davis as a whole for the entire series. Jokic in particular, insane. I mean, we're looking at 27 points for the series, 14 and a half boards, 11.8 assists. So think about that for a second. Your center almost averaged 12 assists for the series. Staggering numbers. He even threw in 1.3 blocks per game, 1.3 steals. I think it's one of the most impressive, probably most just incredible all-around box scores I've seen for a series from any player. Just staggering numbers. So, you know, for the Lakers, they had some great production. I mean, Reeves had a great series. Hachimura had some really key moments in those games. Lonnie Walker, you know, came out and, you know, his moments were in the Warrior series, not so much in the Nuggets series.
Well, I think the problem was that, you know, they have these players that have good roles, but each one doesn't have, you know, takes away something else, right? So they put Schroeder in, and he has pretty, you know, solid defense. He had a decent series actually, and he had actually pretty decent playoffs for the Lakers, but he can't score. So and then once they go, you know, if the Nuggets can rip off a few points, you know, they essentially don't have to defend Schroeder, and then they can focus on LeBron, they can focus on AD and everyone else. And then if you put in D'Angelo Russell, he can't play defense. It's almost like the complete opposite, right? So that and that's the problem with their roster. Austin Reeves is a great player, though. I mean, he played great. It'll be interesting to see what happens with him in the offseason. But that's the thing. Like, they can't get a full lineup in place against the Nuggets starters or even their role players. Bruce Brown had a great game, but they can't get, you know, the rotation in order that can match up for enough minutes against the Nuggets where they can compete for 48 minutes.
Yeah, I'm going back through the Nuggets numbers here. This kind of paints the picture when it comes to the contributions they got from the entire roster. I count 5 players on this roster that shot at least 40% from three for the series.
Wow.
Just staggering. I mean, we're looking at Murray, Jokic, Porter Jr., Caldwell Pope, and Jeff Green, although Jeff Green took a very limited amount of threes in that series. But as far as guys that were on high volume, 4 players, and they all shot at least 4 threes a game. Jokic was at 4.3. Caldwell Pope was at 6.8 a game. Porter Jr. was at 8.3, and Jamal Murray, we got to go to him for a second. He shot 40% on 9.3 threes a game. 32.5 points. He shot 50, 40, 90 for the series. And it's funny, I watch this YouTube channel, RDC World. They have like billions of followers, and they do these videos that, like, they're supposed to be like in the locker room of the losing team, like the Lakers locker room after the game. And, one of the guys is always LeBron in every video. He's acting like he's LeBron. And he's just screaming, is like, how does every team have a Curry but us? Because it's like you play the Warriors, it's like Curry's doing his thing. He's taking 10 threes a game, making 40+%. They get to the next series. Jamal Murray does the same thing. Maybe even played better than Curry did for the series, looking at his numbers. So it's just like they can't catch a break when it comes to guards. They're just shredding them. But, it's definitely like you said, like their guard lineup was give something, take something away. Schroeder had great defense. The shooting wasn't there. The size wasn't there. D'Angelo Russell, I mean, we're talking about his defense being a problem, but his offense was a problem, to be honest. He had a ton of very inefficient games from the field. So it's like, if you're not getting that from D'Angelo, what are you getting? That was the big problem. Right. The discrepancy in guard play, lead guard play between the sides was just so vast. I think it turned the tables for the Nuggets, having a guy that flammable in Jamal Murray. So great series from him. Really happy he's back on his feet 100%. After the ACL tear. But I think it kind of proves that the bubble run for him wasn't a fluke. He didn't come in dropping 30 every game for one season. He came into this year, same thing. Mm-hmm. So really impressive stuff from him. And I think he's just going to use this as a springboard and solidified himself in the absolutely elite tier point guards in the league.
Yeah. And it's good to see that, the Nuggets' first trip ever to the finals, which is crazy. Awesome. Good for them. Because it seems like, when you talk about the Nuggets, you just don't think of them as a loser franchise. They've had competitive teams over the years. They just have never gotten over the hump. So, so good for them. And, all of their players, they all deserve it. And Mike Malone does too. So it's good to see.
Yep. Finally healthy. Last year, they just didn't have the health, but they got it together. Murray is back. Porter Jr. is back. Maybe we should have seen this coming, because even with Jokic, I mean, they were pretty competitive. They were still, I think, a top 4 seed without those guys. So you bring in all the guys, the number 1 seed, they get through the playoffs. They shored up their defense just enough, and they got the job done. So very impressive. So getting into LeBron specifically here, he had a great series himself. I continue to be amazed. I go back and look at that final box score from him for the 22-23 season, game 4 against the Nuggets. Obviously, it wasn't enough. Couldn't quite pull it out in that final game, but 40 points, almost the entirety of the game played, near triple-double. I think he missed a triple-double by 1 assist, I believe, in that game. For a guy that's 38 years old and has as many miles in his body, as many seasons played, 20 seasons, multiple playoff runs. I mean, we're talking about, I think he's played a season's worth of minutes just in the playoffs alone over the course of his career.
He has to, easily, yeah.
Yeah. He really had to, and I think it says a lot about the Lakers that he still had to put in this kind of effort just for them to have a chance against the Nuggets. But all that aside, LeBron hinted at a possible retirement during his press conference to finish off the season. I didn't believe that. I don't know if you thought that would be a possibility for him after that season. I feel like he's going to be back for another one, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. I think there's two trains of thought as far as his comments after that. One is it's fresh. You're talking to him. The wounds are fresh, right? And you're talking to him. He's probably worn out immediately after, and he's probably injured in some way, shape, or form. And he's thinking, wow, I have to get ready for a new season. Like, he needs to relax before he thinks about that. So it's probably tough on him in that way. And then the other way is he's thinking that this roster isn't going to get it done. And he knows that. He just got swept in the Western Conference Finals. And he's probably putting Lakers management and Rob Pelinka's feet to the fire as far as making sure it gets done. Otherwise, I'm open to retirement. That's what I would imagine the two thoughts are. I don't know if it was a strategy move or not, but that's what I would think.
That's where I'm leaning towards as well. When you think about how much rehab, how much work goes into coming back from an injury again and again. I mean, let's not forget, LeBron has had several key injuries over the past 3 to 4 seasons. Before he got to the Lakers, I mean, he played probably at least 70 games every year. I mean, he was Iron Man. Gets to the Lakers, he gets to his mid to late 30s. All of a sudden, it's a rolled ankle. It's a high ankle sprain. Misses several weeks. He misses time for other ailments. And now it's, I think it's some kind of a torn tendon in his foot that might require 2 months of rehab to get back. So when you think about that, for any player, I mean, even a guy as young as Jamal Murray, it's going to be tough. But when you think about LeBron being at his age and how much he's already done, it's just disheartening to have to go through that again. You get to a point where you're just like, is it worth it again to go through it? So I can understand where he's coming from in terms of just having that tone. Like, I'm not sure, I have to think about it. I do think he's considering it. I don't think he's going to go through with it, but I can understand him at least being open to the idea just because it gets old after a while, even for guys that love the game. If you've played 20 years, not many people make it to 20 years in the first place. So it's just a lot to kind of deal with at this stage of his career.
Right.
But when it comes to the possibility of him retiring, what would it mean for the Lakers if he were to retire? It would be a little bit of a shock for me just because of the money that's still kind of out there on his contract. According to what we have on no trade clause, for the 23-24 season, he's owed $46.6 million. And then he holds a player option for the season after that. So I would imagine you to play at least one more year. The report that came out today, I believe, from somebody reporting on it, said that he would fulfill his contract because he does have that, and he has another guaranteed year on his contract. So I would expect him to at least try to get that $46.6 million. But if he were to retire, I mean, what would that mean for the Lakers? What are their options? What would be available to them? What would they have to do to kind of pivot if he were to decide to hang it up, even though we don't believe he's going to go that route?
Well, I think if anyone's paying attention to the Lakers cap situation, they're teetering between being a cap team and dealing with transactions over the cap, or clearing the decks with all of their players other than LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and going under the cap and trying to sign someone that way. And it seems like most likely they're going to try to sign most of these guys back and operate over the cap. But what would happen if LeBron retires is hit that salary, that $46.6 million is null and void. So at that point, you take that off the books. Now that might completely change what you want to do as far as strategy, right? And you lose your best player, your second best player. So it's going to change your strategy completely. The other point that I just wanted to bring up, because it seemed like people were bringing up, oh, maybe he'll sit out a year, and then he can come back when Bronny might be eligible. He'll be eligible for the draft, might get drafted, and then he can just go and play wherever he goes. But the problem with that is, if he officially retires for a year, he comes back, the Lakers are still going to have exclusive rights over him. So that's not going to do it. The only other play I could see if he really wanted out of the Lakers is he's doing this to say, you either trade me, waive me, or I'm retiring, and it's either that or nothing, which I don't think that's the case. But to the people who think he's going to sit out a year just to come back and play with Bronny, he's still going to be, the Lakers are still going to have his rights at that point. So yeah, I think that's an important point.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, with the Lakers situation, I mean, if that were to come to pass and he retired, and like you said, that contract is null and void, my first thought before I went to the cap sheet is like, wow, they're not going to have a lot of wiggle room. But if they want to, they do have a lot of options out there. They have a lot of free agents upcoming. You go and look at it, and you see D'Angelo Russell coming off the books, Lonnie Walker, Jared Vanderbilt's non-guaranteed, Mo Bamba's non-guaranteed, Shaq Harrison, who was a late season pickup, is non-guaranteed at 2.4. So between all the non-guarantees, the upcoming free agencies, Hachimura and Reeves, it's been reported that the Lakers are going to bring those guys back. But Malik Beasley is even a team option. So if they want to just drop that 16.5 for next year, they can do that. So really the only big contract on their books that's going to be there regardless is Anthony Davis.
Right.
And other than that, it's just, hey, you can remake this roster in any way you want because of everybody that's coming off the Bucks. So if LeBron were to retire.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt. Not only is it the only big contract on the books, it's literally the only contract on the books, other than your draft picks, other than your first round pick that will obviously have a salary. Other than that, you can clear every single other person other than Anthony Davis if James retired. So the problem with that is your best free agents out there, Kyrie Irving and James Harden. So enjoy the toxicity. Go ahead, sign those two guys and have
And
at
it's
it.
not like they can get Harden anyway because he's going to the Rockets according to all the experts.
Yeah,
So
that
it's
one
been
is
with mine already.
that's an interesting one too. I don't understand it for either side, but
No, I
we'll
don't
see if it
either.
happens.
We're gonna have to table that for another day because that's very interesting in itself. That's a whole other
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, and we'll have to dive more into the Lakers as well. They have an interesting restricted free agent situation with Austin Reeves as far as the Gilbert Arenas provision and what they can offer him, and what other teams are allowed to offer him, and the tricky poison pill provision as a result, and all of that. It gets really interesting. So
It
talk about
does.
all of their fun cap scenarios down the road.
We will definitely get into that. Well, we're I'm thinking we'll plan on doing some kind of cap update series as we get closer to free agency. Just kind
Certainly.
of take stock of where every team kind of finds themselves after the season, but that's definitely in the pipeline for us. So when we kind of take a look over to the opposite conference, so the Eastern Conference Finals here, things have gotten very interesting on that front. As we know, it was approaching a sweep. The Heat were one half away from closing it out in Game 4. They held a 4-point lead going into halftime, and then it was just turnover city. I think for the Celtics, the one key difference in their game plan going in and why they've been able to kind of flip the script is defensively, they're really just kind of keying in on the best players. And they're not respecting Jimmy Butler from outside. They're not respecting Bam. They're loading up on whoever decides to drive the paint, because the Celtics have actually been giving up a lot of points in the paint in those games that they lost. Game 3 specifically, I mean, it was just, he getting attacks. Even Duncan Robinson was taking guys off the dribble. So they said, okay, if that's the way it's going to be, we're going to ignore Jimmy Butler. We're going to ignore Bam. We're going to ignore some of those guys. And anytime we get a drive, we're going to collapse the defense. And doing that created a lot of turnovers. And for the Celtics specifically, turnovers against the Heat are, I feel like it's an automatic bucket or a foul if it's a live ball turnover. So generating a lot of easy points, their confidence has been built up from that, because it's a mental thing. If you start seeing the ball go through the hoop, even if it's a layup or a dunk, I think that also kind of plays a part if you're taking threes, just because you're in a mental state now to where, oh, I'm feeling better, the ball's going in. So you take these threes, even if they're step back threes, they're going down. Tatum for me is kind of a streaky player at times. So
No
when he
question.
flipped the switch, it was just he just took off. And that went all the way through Game 5. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I felt like the game was over after the first quarter, just because of how stark of a difference there was between the Celtics shot making and the Heat shot making, and then just the energy that the Celtics were displaying on the court. They were winning the 50-50 ball battle. They were getting offensive rebounds. If the Heat can't win the hustle stats, I just feel like the game is over. That was their kind of key to getting to this point, was just out hustling and just generating extra possessions. And when that was gone, the floodgates open for the Celtics. So that's where I'm coming from. That's my slightly biased perspective as a Heat fan. But honestly, it's just, you look at the tape, you look at some of the clips, that's what it kind of bears out. So what have you seen from from Boston so far that's just kind of flipped the script for them? Anything else
No,
specifically?
I don't think that's biased at all. I think that's really almost exactly what it is. The only other thing that I would say is, I don't know what's the chicken or the egg, but because I think when they start hitting shots, they start playing defense. They gain energy from their shot making, and then they start getting in their faces. And it was so visible last night, especially in Game 5, that the second that they started hitting their shots, they were in their faces at the perimeter, like you said, taking away the 3-point shot and making them work for every single basket. And they're working off of the early lead, and they never let it go. But the other thing is, I mean, Eric Spoelstra is probably the best coach in the league. At what point can you not work with the roster that you have when you have Haywood Highsmith playing 36 minutes because now Gabe Vincent's out, right? I mean, at some point it's got to give. The Celtics are just a deeper, more talented team on paper, and once they start hitting their shots and actually trying on defense, they were a good defensive team. They were top 5 net rating both in offense and defense during the regular season. So it's not like a surprise that they should be good at defense. They just for some reason hadn't been performing in these first 3 games, and finally they have. And without Gabe Vincent there too, I think that's it. It's weird to have to say that, but it without him there, you have to go to that next guy, and at some point it's going to give. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, I don't know if he's playing in Game 6, but how much does that affect the Heat's rotation? Because he was playing really well. All those those next level, the Caleb Martin, Gabe Vincent, all those guys were playing so well for them. And I think when you pull one out, it just affects so much for them.
It does. Like that was my thought when I was going over the whole series in my head a little bit today, was that the loss of Gabe Vincent was crushing. And I think it's compounded by the fact that there are other key players already out.
Right.
So if Tyler Hero wasn't hurt, okay, you find a way to compensate with Tyler Hero's production. You can get that from him because he's probably their most electric scorer on the team, pure scorer in Tyler Hero. But the fact that he's not there, the fact that Oladipo's already been lost, now you have Gabe go out. You're missing 3 key rotation players on this team that, like you said, they're already kind of at a deficit when it comes to pure overall talent on the court and overall depth. So when that depth is hampered further, then it just creates a situation where there's such a heavy load placed on the starters to set the tone. It's just really difficult to overcome. I mean, Gabe Vincent shot 11 of 14 in Game 3. He made 6 of 9 threes. The guy was electric. Even in Game 1, I mean, 15 points, 4 of 6 shooting, 3 of 5 from 3. So he is another kind of flammable scorer for them. And that's something that's in short supply in the Heat roster, is guys that can just go out there and just get a bucket.
Right.
From not just from in the paint, because Bam and Jimmy, as talented as they are, they generate almost nothing from the perimeter. Their shots come from 15 feet and in 90+% of the time. With Gabe Vincent, it's like, this guy can get 4, 5, 6 threes in a game off the dribble, not just handoff, come off a screen, catch and shoot. I mean, this is a guy that can shoot from deep. He can get hot in a hurry. He can lay in points and bunches. So when he is on fire, it's no coincidence that the Heat do well. And then when they lost that game in Game 4, where he actually got hurt, he only shot he had 17 points. He shot 5 for 10, but it was it's one of those situations to where he was hurt, and I don't know if that trailed off at all in the towards the end of the game, but not having him is just such a brutal blow. And I also wonder, just as far as the effort level, because I've seen that wane a little bit in the last 2 losses. I just think when you play as hard as they do and you're missing guys, so the minutes load goes up for everybody, you go through that grind of a series against the Knicks, you play your heart out. Guys play so many minutes. At some point, I just think maybe just the physical aspect of it is starting to take a toll. Guys play so hard, and I mean, the way they play too. I mean, they're physical. They bump and grind and take charges. Maybe that's starting to catch up.
Yeah, and it's team oriented too, and they play. Their zone had been so effective too, and you take Gabe Vincent out of what they do. He's a big part of that zone defense. When you take him out, you have to insert someone else in. Spo's going to coach him up, but that's another side of it too. But on the offensive side, it's like, not only are you taking away those points, but now you're taking away the guy who scored those points and putting him in probably someone that the Celtics don't have to really worry about. So now they can start focusing on even Duncan Robinson more. They can put more pressure on Jimmy. They can put more pressure on Bam. They don't have to focus on anyone, those other guys anymore. When before they absolutely obviously had to respect Gabe Vincent. So it's a domino effect when someone like that goes out. Once you get to the Final Four, it's like these little things can have such a big effect.
Matters.
And on top of it being like a momentum crusher too, right? Like you could feel it changing in that game when he got hurt, and then it moves into the game 5. It just carries on, and then we'll see what happens with the next game.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, I've heard it several times before. I mean, Game 6 they have to treat it like Game 7. They really do. Winning in TD Garden in a Game 7, that's just not where you want to be. The Celtics typically, when their backs are against the wall and it's a do or die, that's when they show up. That's where they perform at their best. We saw it in Game 4, Game 5. I mean, those were do or die games, and they came out and were firing on all cylinders. So I expect that to be the same in Game 7 if we're to come down to that. I don't think the Heat have a great chance of winning that game. So tomorrow is huge. Tomorrow is it decides everything. So, I think Jimmy and Bam have to just kind of carry the mantle on that front. Hopefully Gabe is back. We'll see. He's had a few days since he didn't play in Game 5. So I think it's possible that he can still pull this out, but a lot of people are sweating right now. That's for sure. I'm sweating. People are sweating because it's not an ordinary scenario to where, the Nuggets were up 3-0. If they lost Game 4, okay, big deal. They're still clearly the better team.
Right.
With the Heat, it's like you're kind of playing with house money the whole way, and the margins are so slim. Losing 1 or 2 games, it really starts to kind of weigh on everybody just because the margins are already so slim. So now if guys are getting hurt, it makes it so tough to compete and beat a team good. I mean, the Celtics were, they are where they are for a reason. They have 2 of the best players in the game and a lot of talent there. So we'll see what happens. But tomorrow is going to be a really big day in Heat history for sure. They got to get that one.
Yeah, it is an interesting feeling. It's because, like you said, like if it was the Nuggets and even the Lakers got 2, you're still like, well, the Nuggets are gonna close it out. It's not that big of a deal. But it's like this almost perfect alignment of like, wow, the 8 seed and the 8 seeds, one of their better players got hurt. It's like this perfect alignment of things going wrong, and the way that the Celtics just won too, right? Like they just smoked them in their building, and they just blew doors. And you just wonder how. I think just the beginning of the game is going to be huge, that first quarter, to see if one team is going to take a huge lead or if it's going to be just competitive and close the whole way through. And it's impossible to predict. It's impossible.
It really is. The Heat make it that way. You just don't know.
So do the Celtics. I mean, so do the Celtics.
Right. Them too.
The whole playoffs. I mean, they lost to the Hawks in Boston. They lost. They had to win 6 and 7 against Philly. So they haven't made it easy on themselves all playoff long too. Both teams have been Jekyll and Hyde, in their own right. So we don't know what we're going to get. Hopefully, we get a competitive game either way. At least we have something to talk about. Thank God.
That's true.
Well, not for you, but thank God.
Of just nothing.
Yeah.
When it comes to the NBA, at least.
Right.
So that would have been tough pill to swallow. But here we are. Game 6 coming up. One last topic here on this podcast. This is pretty interesting because I've had a lot of thoughts on this. There's actually a couple of changes that might be coming in to play. And one of them for sure is going to be tested out in the Summer League this July. But when it comes to one of these rule changes, the first of which being the flop rule. So the competition committee for the NBA has discussed implementing a technical situation where if a team has a player that's found to be flopping, the other team will be awarded a free throw, kind of like a defensive 3-second violation, where it's a technical and you get a free throw for the other team. It'd be something like that. I don't know if it's going to be an escalating thing, or if you do it again, it's like, something else happens. But I think this is interesting because back in, I would say 14, 15, somewhere in there, several years ago, the league implemented that they were finding players for flopping. Right. So it was an escalating thing. I think it was $5K, 10, and it escalated to a point where, it can be a 20, $25K fine or something if you kept doing it. I feel like that went away, or the league got really lax on enforcing that rule. Guys flop all the time. You see Trae Young, you see Embiid, you see Luca, you see CP3, you see all these players, Marcus Smart, and no penalties at all. I don't see anything. So I think it's starting to get to a point where these players feel like they can get away with it. So it's becoming more prevalent. So the league is taking notice and they're like, okay, we're going to have to do something to curb this. And to be honest, the fines helped. But in this day and age, it's like fines don't really do much of anything. So now they're going to have an in-game penalty. So it's going to make the guys think twice about, embellishing contact. Now, I wonder if it's going to be like, oh, you completely made up contact, it's a flop, whatever. Or if you do get hit and you fall or maybe fall back a little bit more than you should, like Embiid, for example, are they going to take notice of that and say that's a flop? You should have been falling because you're almost 300 pounds.
Yeah.
It's going to be a weird line to kind of navigate. I wonder where that is. And it's going to be interesting to see like more reviews. That's my main worry about this. Like, is it going to slow the game down to take a look at this? Like, that's where I'm coming from. Overall, I'm in favor of it. The rule changes. So
yeah, I mean, if you're taking flopping out of the game, that's, for the love of God, please do it. But honestly, like, I want to take flopping out of the game, but can we take complaining to the refs out of the game first? I mean,
oh yeah, thank you, yeah.
But like, just call technicals when they're screaming at you after every play. But either way, that's beside the point. As far as this rule is concerned, you brought up exactly what I was going to say, is where there's going to be a fine line. And when you're looking at it in slow motion, if they're making contact and they flop, it's going to be really hard to judge if it was okay to fall or not.
Yeah.
So, someone could just lose their footing and it looks like a flop. So I think it's going to have to come down to a clear and obvious, no one made contact with you and you flailed back like you got hit. I think that's what it's going to have to be. Because if you're like the Embiid situation, I mean, if he, leaned back and the guy pushed him in some way, who's to know if he just lost balance and fell? It'll just be hard to gauge that when you're looking I mean, we already know how hard it is to judge a flagrant and how, if someone did something on purpose, because it's happening so fast. And then we're watching these things frame by frame. We don't know. You can't tell when you're doing that. So it's going to be tough to judge. I think it just has to be this clear and obvious rule. But if it helps taking flopping out of the game, I'm certainly for it.
I'm for it too. But when it comes to this rule, if you're going to do this, I really just would plead with the officials and the replay center, just be consistent with the calls. Like, if we can just get that.
You know what? It might even be better. And I don't want to get into like, hey, let's make up new rules, but put it on the other team to like challenge it and make it a technical or something. And then it's not, they're reviewing every single thing every single time. Like the coach on the other team has to force them to review it for a technical. So we're not reviewing a flop every time someone flops. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to slow it down that much. We already review enough.
We do too much, to be honest. But I'm just concerned that there's going to be a lack of consistency with these calls, like we've seen with flagrant calls.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I watch these games and I'll see a guy, like a perfect example was, I think it was in game 4, I want to say. I think it was Marcus Smart, I think, threw his arm. I think it was to Caleb Martin. He kind of threw his arm out, kind of like he's trying to hit him and missed. And they're like, oh, it's common foul.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting back and I'm like, hold on, guys. So you're telling me if Marcus Smart throws a forearm or a punch or whatever and misses, it's a common foul. But if I'm going up for a layup and there's a natural motion and a guy, or my arm just happens to go out like normal and a guy gets hit in the face and that's a flagrant.
Yeah.
I don't see how that makes any sense.
I totally agree. He literally turned around and he got mad and tried to elbow him and missed. It made no sense. Whereas exactly what you're talking about, in, the heat of battle, you're going up and you just like defend yourself, accidentally make contact with someone in their face, and you get it.
That's unnecessary contact. I'm like, well, guys, it's a contact sport. It's incidental contact. Like, let's be real about this. But that's where I'm just kind of a little bit uneasy with this flopping thing because it's really hard to kind of determine like what is and what's not. And I really don't want to see there being this, like, you go back and look at it now when it comes to flagrant fouls, I have no idea what they're going to call.
No one does. You listen to the announcers, they disagree. They bring in their expert who is a former referee. He says something different. They're all wrong.
We're all just on different pages. Like no one's understanding what's going on.
Which just shows that no one knows. It's completely subjective. And that's why I think with this rule, I would just make it, if you flop when you're not made, no contact is made, it's a technical. I think that would be the easiest way to do it. But they won't. They won't. They'll make it more difficult than that.
They will. It's a huge gray area, and then it's a whole ordeal, man.
Yeah.
But there's actually one other thing reported, and we'll end on this one. The committee is also considering bringing in another change. Specifically, this one is related to the challenge call. So it's interesting because these two are kind of actually related, because you suggested that the other team challenge it if they suspected a flop call or a flop being committed, but they're considering giving a team a second challenge during a game if the first one is successful. And I've campaigned for this. I'm sure if you listen to a broadcast on any national platform, they'll say this. Like, why don't you get another one if the first one is successful? Because basically, like, using a challenge before the fourth quarter to me is a waste, because what do you gain unless the Stars in foul trouble if you use a challenge in the first quarter? But now, if you use a challenge and it's successful in the first quarter, you still have one in your back pocket for the critical part of the game in the last 5 minutes, to where there's a call that can literally like determine the game. So I do like rewarding teams for getting it right, not just giving them one and saying like you lost it even though you got it right. But again, the main concern is like, how much does this slow down the game? If there's a second challenge, let's say each team wins their first and they both get a second, that in conjunction with the flopping calls, like, is it too much? That's my main concern. But I guess Summer League might shed some more light on this. We'll have to see it in live action before we really kind of get too serious about it.
Well, I completely agree. If you challenge it and get it right because the ref got it wrong, then you should retain your challenge. That's clear. It's absolute common sense. I would rather that extend the game and remove more the abilities of the refs to do self-reviews on their own that slow down the game. I'd rather have the coaches' options to, expand the coaches' options to challenge and restrict the refs' ability to just do it on their own, because those are the ones that seem to just constantly, because then it brings in the strategy. It's still limited. Whereas when the ref does it, it's just like, oh yeah, let's look at this one. Oh yeah, let's look at this one. Okay, let's look at this one. And it slows it down like crazy. Whereas with the coaches, it's still limited. It's still only one. If you lose it, it's gone. So I completely agree with the rule change.
Yeah, both of them are going to be interesting, because I don't think they've made a final call on this. All I've seen is that we get to Summer League and they're going to test it, which, I mean, Summer League, I mean, I'm just campaigning for it right now, but that's another thing about Summer League that's so great, is it's a good testing ground for these rules.
Right.
So they can look and see, does it make sense? Does it work? If it doesn't work in Summer League, it's not going to work in the real games, the big games. So that's a great thing about it. There's a place to where these can be kind of thrown in, and they can see how it works. And if the game is too long, there's too many stoppages, maybe they pull one back and shelve it for another season, or they pull both out or something like that. So at least they have that option, and they don't have to test it during the season where the stakes are higher and there's a lot more at stake, in those games. So I do like that aspect of it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, Colin, I think that wraps it up for all our topics for this episode.
We wanted to, speaking of rule changes, let's talk about the 2023 CBA change tracker that we're putting up on the website shortly. It should be, Aaron, when do you think we're going to put that up? Next couple days?
I would say by the time you guys are watching this, because this will be up on Saturday, the 27th. When you guys are watching this, it should be up. So if you go to our website and you check out our tab at the top, it says Cap Resources. There will be a tab. It's going to be the drop down right below Cap Resources is going to be the CBA change tracker. So Colin has put together a list of all the changes brought about in this new CBA. He's made it very specific. He's categorized them and made it very easy for you guys to follow what has been changed. There's a lot that goes along with that. So we figured it'd be a great opportunity to give you guys a way to track everything, monitor it. If you want to look back and see, because right now it can be hard to kind of locate a specific change and see when it's going to be implemented. Because Colin, you said you included a column that says when it's going to be to be put in effect, correct?
Yeah. So the great thing about it is, first of all, we only have the deal memo right now, right? So we don't have the actual new CBA, the actual language. So it's a live document. It's going to change as the language changes and we go along. We only know that the agreed upon rule changes that they have. We don't have the actual language. So things will change, and the minutia, we'll get into the minutia, but it's a live document. So we'll continue to update it as we go along. But everyone can go on there, and it's everything: salary cap, player health, player conduct, draft eligibility, every single category that you can think of. You can sort by category, you can word search it, and you can filter it by when the rules get put in place, whether it's this next salary cap year, July 1st, or the year, at the end of the regular season, or next year, or the year after that, because all of the rules get phased in. So you can take a look at that, really see how this thing is broken down. It's extremely thorough. I may try to simplify it a little bit because I broke it down rule by rule by rule. I may try to ease into it a little bit for the viewers, but go check it out on our website when you get a chance.
Yeah. So, Colin's put a lot of work into this, guys, and it's a really great resource. So I encourage you all to check that out. Our website is notradeclause.com. Linked right here for you guys within the podcast if you're watching this on YouTube. Also, our draft capital page has been updated recently we had a bunch of pick conveyances that came about as a result of the draft lottery not too long ago. So if you guys are looking to see what happened as far as like who got picks, who lost picks as a result of that, because there were protections involved, be sure to check that out. That's all there for you. And then our cap sheets also have specifically, if a team has the specific pick is put in there as a placeholder, and then their salary for the draft. So the Lakers have number 17, $3.6 million. That's included. So that's for every team. So if you guys want to check that out, it's also live on our website. And like Colin said, this is going to be developing. It's going to be changing over time. So we have all this stuff coming up for you guys as we get closer to the draft, closer to free agency. We'll have a lot more coming your way. So be sure to check it out. So guys, we appreciate you for checking out this podcast. We're glad to be back. Like we said, we hope to see you on the next installment of No Trade Clause. In the meantime, stay glued to that TV. Check out the rest of these playoffs. That should be a great time. And we'll be back with another podcast going over the playoffs and going into the offseason here real soon. Take care, guys.